One general went 15 years without losing a single battle. 15 years in enemy territory, outnumbered, far from home. And he still lost the war. His name was Hannibal. And the reason he lost had nothing to do with tactics, nothing to do with courage, and nothing to do with the quality of his soldiers. Rome didn't beat Hannibal in a battle. Rome beat him in a system. A machine so deep, so embedded into the physical world that by the time your army arrived, the war was already half over. This is the story of that machine, and why, 2,000 years later, nobody has stopped copying it.
January 49 BC. A man stands at a river, not a mighty river, barely a stream really, the Rubicon, shallow enough to wade across, but crossing it with an army? That was treason under Roman law. Behind Julius Caesar, one battle-hardened legion, loyal to him personally. Ahead, Rome, a senate that had ordered him to come home unarmed, and political enemies with more men, more money, and more institutional power than he had. He crossed anyway. What happened next is what his enemies never understood until it was too late. Within days, Caesar's forces were moving south like water finding a slope, fed, supplied, growing. Towns weren't just surrendering. They were surrendering before his scouts even arrived. The men opposing him weren't slow. They weren't cowards. They simply could not think as fast as the system Caesar was operating inside. That system is what this video is about. Not the battles, the machine underneath them.
Here is something that should make no sense. Rome was annihilated at the Trebia River in 218 BC. They were ambushed and encircled at Lake Trasimene. At Cannae, in a single August afternoon in 216 BC, somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered, the bloodiest day in Roman military history. Their own city was sacked so thoroughly by Gauls in 390 BC that later Romans genuinely weren't sure if their early historical records had survived. And yet Rome built the largest contiguous empire the Western world has ever seen. An empire that lasted, in one form or another, nearly 1,000 years. So the question is never how Rome won battles. The real question is how Rome kept winning, despite losing them. The answer isn't Roman discipline. It isn't some idea of Roman virtue or divine favor. It's something far less romantic and far more dangerous. Rome built a machine, a logistical machine, precise, scalable, and so deeply embedded into the physical world that defeating it wasn't primarily a military problem. It was a geometric one. To understand that machine, you have to start where every Roman soldier started, on the road.
Picture a Roman road, not a worn dirt track, not a muddy path between villages. A road that was engineered, intentional, and built to outlast the civilization that made it. And in many cases, it did. Construction began with a trench dug down to stable ground. Then came the layers, rubble and broken stone for foundation, finer gravel and sand above that, and on the most critical military routes, fitted stone on top. The surface was cambered, sloped gently from center to edge, so rainwater drained into ditches cut alongside. Every major road was marked with milestones, stone columns recording the distance to the nearest town or to Rome itself. These weren't decorative, they were administrative instruments. The Via Appia is the clearest example. Built in 312 BC, it ran south from Rome straight through territory Rome was still fighting to pacify in the Second Samnite War. Notice that. The road was built during the war, not after. Infrastructure didn't follow conquest. It enabled it. Control followed the road. By the 2nd century AD, Rome maintained between 50,000 and 80,000 Roman miles of publicly administered road. What that network connected was the point. Every legion, every grain depot, every river crossing, every provincial capital, every garrison,
linked into one integrated system that could respond to a crisis anywhere in the empire at a speed no rival state could match.
A Roman legion on a good road could cover 15 to 20 Roman miles per day, reliably, consistently, day after day. That's not an impressive number until you understand what it meant operationally. It meant consistency. Armies moving through unmapped terrain, foraging for food, crossing rivers without bridges, arrived slower, weaker, and in worse shape. Roman armies arrived on schedule because the landscape itself had been redesigned to make schedules possible. Augustus later formalized the cursus publicus, a state relay system using horses and road stations that could carry urgent messages at roughly 50 miles per day. A governor on the Rhine reporting a Germanic incursion, a revolt beginning in Judea. Rome could know and begin moving before many enemy coalitions had finished deciding whether to fight. No other power in the ancient world had anything like it. Carthage didn't. Parthia didn't. The tribal confederacies of northern Europe didn't. They had armies. Rome had a nervous system.
But a nervous system only works if the body can eat. A Roman legion of 4,000 to 5,000 men needed several tons of grain every single month. Add horses, mules, allied contingents, cavalry, support staff, and you're looking at a logistical requirement that, if unmet, ends a campaign faster than any enemy could. Most ancient armies handled this the same way. They foraged. They moved through friendly or conquered territory and took what they needed from the land. This worked until it didn't. Foraging armies had to keep moving. Stay too long and you stripped the area bare. Move into hostile territory and your supply lines became targets. Push too far from your base and you outran your own support.
Rome understood this problem better than anyone. And Rome built a solution: pre-positioned supply depots constructed along campaign routes before armies marched, grain levies drawn from allied and subject communities, a web of storage facilities that extended Roman operational reach far beyond what any foraging strategy could achieve. Caesar's Gallic War is the most precisely documented case study we have. Caesar records grain availability as a primary factor governing nearly every major decision he made. Before a significant movement, the question was always, where is the grain, is it secured, and when does it arrive? When the answer was uncertain, Caesar maneuvered rather than committed. The army was an instrument of a logistical framework. When the framework said wait, Caesar waited.
His Gallic opponent, Vercingetorix, understood this. His answer was scorched earth. Burn the fields, destroy the towns, strip the countryside of anything a Roman army could eat. At Gergovia in 52 BC, it partially worked. Caesar was pushed back, one of his genuine tactical reverses. But there was a fatal flaw. Vercingetorix couldn't feed his own coalition without those same fields. The crops being burned were Gallic crops. The towns being destroyed were Gallic towns. Rome could absorb the disruption. A coalition of tribes held together by urgency and anger could not.
Then there is Hannibal. In the 3 years after crossing the Alps, Hannibal destroyed 3 Roman armies in sequence: the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, Cannae. At Cannae, his force, actually outnumbered, executed a double envelopment so complete that Roman soldiers reportedly died unable to fall down because the crush of bodies held them upright. After Cannae, several major southern Italian cities defected. It looked like Rome might actually break. It didn't. The Latin colonies held. Rome levied new legions. Fabius Maximus adopted a strategy of deliberate avoidance. No pitched battles, constant harassment, denying Hannibal the decisive victory that might fracture Rome's alliance network further. And Hannibal, undefeated in the field, slowly bled out. He had no logistical network in Italy. Every man he lost was gone permanently. Every veteran cavalryman, every elephant, every specialist, irreplaceable. Rome lost legions,
and rebuilt them. Hannibal won battles and watched his army shrink. He remained in southern Italy for 15 years without losing a major engagement, and lost the war anyway. He was recalled to Africa in 203 BC to face a Roman invasion he had never anticipated. Scipio Africanus defeated him at Zama in 202 BC. The machine hadn't beaten Hannibal in a single battle. It had beaten him in time. The grain was always coming. The replacements were always coming. And for Hannibal, they were not.
Here is something that almost never makes it into popular accounts of Roman warfare. At the end of every single day's march, after covering 15 to 20 miles on foot, carrying 40 to 60 pounds of equipment, a Roman legion built a fort. Not a rough camp, not a circle of wagons, a fortified position with a ditch, a rampart, a palisade wall, organized interior streets, designated positions for every unit, and latrines placed specifically to prevent water contamination. Every night, in Gaul, in Syria, in Britain, in the North African desert, wherever the army stopped, a fort appeared. The layout followed a standardized plan. The command tent at the center, the main internal streets dividing the camp into predictable quadrants. A soldier who had served in Germany knew exactly where the armory was relative to his tent, the same way he knew it in Judea.
Think about what this meant for any enemy pursuing a Roman force. You've just engaged a Roman column, perhaps pushed them back. Night is falling. You move through the dark to finish what the afternoon started, to catch the Romans in disarray. You arrive at the Roman position. There is a ditch. There is a rampart. There is a palisade with sentries at regular intervals. The Romans are behind walls, organized, rested, ready to fight again at dawn. The offensive momentum you built in the afternoon? Reset. Every single night, it resets. Then consider Caesar at Elatia, 52 BC. Vercingetorix had chosen high ground on a plateau surrounded by rivers and hills, difficult to assault directly. Caesar didn't assault it. He built a wall around it, 11 miles of continuous fortification, encircling the entire position. Then, receiving intelligence that a massive Gallic relief force was assembling outside, Caesar ordered a second wall, facing outward, 13 to 14 miles of additional fortifications designed to fight off the relief force while the inner wall continued to starve out the garrison. Caesar's army was simultaneously besieging one force and defending against another, all because every man in that army knew how to dig, build, and construct under pressure. Military engineering wasn't a specialist function. It was a baseline competency distributed across every soldier in the legion. The Roman legionary was a construction worker who could fight. That distinction, more than any tactical innovation, in what made the machine so hard to stop.
To understand a system's strengths, look at where it was nearly broken. 3 men across 3 centuries found different weak points in the Roman machine. Each ultimately failed, and each failure tells us exactly where the machine was strongest. Pyrrhus of Epirus, 280 BC. Pyrrhus arrived in Italy with a Hellenistic professional army, Macedonian-style infantry, mercenaries, war elephants, and defeated Roman forces at Heraclea and Asculum. His famous remark, "One more such victory, and I am ruined." It's usually quoted as tactical commentary, but it was equally a logistical observation. Pyrrhus's veterans were irreplaceable in Italy. Rome drew replacements from the Socii, the network of Latin and Italian allied communities bound by treaty to provide troops. Lose a Roman legion, and Rome raised another. Lose Pyrrhus's specialists, and there were no others. He had brought a finite instrument to fight an inexhaustible one. He left Italy without achieving his goals.
Hannibal, 218 to 203 BC. Already covered in detail, but one addition. Hannibal's Italian strategy was not fundamentally military. It was political. He wasn't trying to sack Rome. He was trying to shatter Rome's allied network, to demonstrate that Rome couldn't protect its Italian partners and peel them away. After Cannae, this partially worked, but the Latin heartland held because Rome had spent generations building political relationships that gave those communities a genuine stake in Roman success. Hannibal could burn fields. He couldn't burn that. Arminius, 9 AD, the most instructive case. Arminius was a Germanic prince who had served as a Roman auxiliary officer. He held Roman citizenship, the rank of equestrian, and crucially, he understood Roman military doctrine from the inside. The march formations, the camp construction, the command assumptions Roman officers carried into unfamiliar terrain. In September of 9 AD, he used that knowledge to destroy 3 legions in the Teutoburger Forest. Governor Varus trusted him. When Arminius reported a revolt requiring immediate response, Varus marched with 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers into dense forest. Over 3 days of coordinated ambush, broken terrain, constant rain, no room to form battle lines, 3 legions were gone. Augustus reportedly wandered his palace for days, repeating, "Varus, give me back my legions."
Rome never conquered Germany east of the Rhine. In that specific, bounded sense, Arminius succeeded where Pyrrhus and Hannibal did not. But here is what he could not do. He had no administrative system capable of converting military victory into territorial control. No roads, no supply depots, no mechanism for governing the territory he had just defended. When Roman retaliatory campaigns swept back into Germanic territory under Germanicus, Arminius could fight, but he could not hold. Within a decade of the Teutoburg, he was assassinated by members of his own tribe. The legions lost were rebuilt within years. The machine Arminius needed, the logistical and administrative depth that would have let him exploit his victory, no Germanic confederation of the period could build. He had broken the machine in one forest. He could not build one to replace it.
There is a version of this story that ends with Rome triumphant. The engineering celebrated, the system vindicated. That version leaves something important out. The machine ran on fuel, and the fuel was people. Rome did not fund its military through domestic taxation alone. The primary engine of Roman military finance was conquest itself. War spoils redistributed through the state. Provincial taxation extracted from newly acquired territories. Sicily's grain, Spain's silver, Egypt's extraordinary agricultural surplus, which Augustus converted into a de facto imperial holding because it was so financially critical to the entire operation. The system was self-financing through expansion, which created its own logic. Rome needed to keep acquiring resources to fund the machine that acquired resources. The expansion wasn't incidental to Roman power. It was structurally built into how Roman power paid for itself. Road construction in the provinces operated on the same principle. Legionaries built roads as standard duty. But in occupied provinces, construction also drew on requisitioned labor from local communities. Compulsory service owed to the Roman state. The people the roads were used to control helped build the roads used to control them. The Roman legionary himself wasn't exempt from the weight of the machine. A common soldier under Augustus earned 225 denarii per year, out of which deductions were made for food, clothing, and equipment. He served 20 years. He was promised land or cash upon discharge. That promise was real, but frequently delayed. The tension between veterans and a state that owed them land was a live political crisis throughout the late Republic. Several of the major civil conflicts of the 1st century BC had veterans' grievances somewhere in the foundation. And beneath all of this, slavery. The expansion of Roman slavery through conquest was woven into the economic logic of the system.
prisoners of war were a primary source of enslaved labor throughout the Republican period. Estimates for the enslaved population of Roman Italy at the height of the Republic range from 1 to 3 million people, perhaps 20 to 35% of the peninsula's total population. The grain that fed Roman legions came from fields worked by people who may well have become enslaved because of what Roman legions had done to their homelands. The machine built, the machine fed, the machine fortified. And it worked reliably at scale across centuries because the costs were distributed across an empire's worth of people who were not consulted about the arrangement. That is not a footnote to Roman logistical achievement. It is the foundation of it.
The Roman logistical machine did not die with Rome. The roads stayed. Thousands of miles of Roman road surface, alignment, and foundation remained in use across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, traceable even today. The administrative frameworks stayed. The concept of a state-maintained road network, pre-positioned military supply, engineering as a baseline military competency. These ideas moved through Byzantine administration, through medieval European governance, through the colonial empires of the early modern period, and they are still moving. Modern military doctrine across virtually every major power teaches that amateurs study tactics and professionals study logistics. That formulation is the lesson Rome spent 4 centuries demonstrating at continental scale. But the deeper consequence is harder to sit with.
Every system of this kind runs on the same fuel Rome used. It runs on people at the bottom who did not choose to be part of it. The legionaries who built roads and marched on them for 20 years far from home on modest pay. The provincial communities who fed armies that had just finished subduing them, who then built the roads those armies traveled on. The men and women whose enslavement was not a byproduct of conquest, but one of its explicit economic objectives. Rome didn't just build a weapon no one could fully defend against. It built a model for how political power, physical infrastructure, administrative depth, and organized extraction can be woven together into something that outlasts any individual battle, any individual defeat, any individual general. And nobody in the 2,000 years since Rome began laying roads into other people's territory has fully stopped copying it. The roads are still there. You can walk on some of them today. The question worth sitting with isn't how Rome built them. It's what they were for and who paid.